So thank you everyone for joining the Pride and Communities on Discord podcast. This is on the Community Architects server. We've got some amazing 5 guests with us today. I'm super excited to talk about what we've got to go over with topics and nice lineup of questions and things. And hopefully we might be able to do a Q&A at the end. Feel free to ask your questions in the chat. Our event moderators will have a look out and keep an eye out for those questions too. So Hadoken, would you be able to introduce yourself very briefly and just tell me who you are and what you do and yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm SirHadoken. Most people just call me Hado. That's totally fine if you wanna refer to that, shorten the syllables. I am a community manager, so to speak, for the Geometry Dash Creators server. If any of you are familiar with that one mobile game that probably like blew up in your middle school classrooms, we have a whole community on Discord that we've sort of built alongside multiple subsets, and the community that I oversee focuses on artistic expression, creating levels, and improving at, expressing yourself artistically. I am a gay man, and so I'm here both as someone who's firsthand experienced what it's like to be a part of the LGBT community, as someone who has realized a need for a real safe space for a bulk of the Geometry Dash community as a place that doesn't really have its own official LGBT space yet. And so some of the endeavors that we've been putting in place as of recent have been to try to give those people a voice, and educate some of the rest of the community. Being relatively younger people, they may not be as educated or informed about what LGBT identity and pride means. And so we've been trying to just reach out and make sure everyone's on the same page on that, so that we build sort of a support network for one another.
I love that. I think that's really nice. There's could be a lot to talk about there. I think that's really spot on for what we're going to be discussing today, so I'm glad you're here. Next up, I'd love to ask Citri if you would be able to give a little introduction about yourself. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, my name is Emily. I am a community manager here at Discord. I have been in community now for, good golly, almost 5 years. I've been in primarily gaming and hardware spaces and tech, and I've been with Discord for about a year. So my pronouns are she, her, and they, them. You can use either one. I am a queer professional that is building communities of all different kinds. So this topic means a lot to me, not only to make sure that I make safe spaces for others, but as somebody who's a queer person, and it means a lot to me to be able to build spaces where people feel safe. So yeah, that is me.
Awesome. That's so nice to hear, and I'm really hoping that we can talk more about those quiz spaces and the kind of stuff that you've done there. So next up on my list is Helperino. Would you be able to give a little introduction about yourself? Yeah, tell us about the things that you've experienced a little bit.
Happily. Happy Pride, folks. My name is Zach. I use he, him pronouns. I'm coming to this panel as a white cisgender gay man, and I'm very, very excited to be here. At Discord, I'm a community moderation program manager, which looks like supporting mods, making educational content, and sort of doing kind of whatever I can to make the whole moderating experience a little bit better. My background is mostly very academic. I'm currently finishing up a PhD studying how communities heal and rebuild in the wake of violence, and I've taught quite a bit at the university level about like identity and politics and social movements. So that's a lot of sort of what I know and am bringing into this space, in addition to my work at Discord.
Amazing. Right. Next up on the list is Alexis. Would you also be able to give an introduction about yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, guys. I'm Alexis. I'm a moderator at Houseplants server. I particularly love engaging with our users in a variety of ways, not just beyond, houseplants, but in regard to how we build community here in Discord, but also in the houseplant community outside of being on the computer. By trade, I am an archaeologist, so an educator, and I just enjoy bringing informative and community aspects to our server in a variety of different ways that extend beyond Pride, but a variety of other things as well.
Amazing. And that brings us to lastly, Ashley, a fellow partner friend of mine. Would you be able to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm Ashley. I'm a queer trans woman. I am the community manager for the Trans Community Center Discord server. Yeah, no, we kind of focus on quite heavily bringing specifically trans and non-binary individuals and those questioning about their gender identity, bringing them together, particularly on the community, specifically focusing on those three, trying to provide as much support and guidance as we can.
Awesome. I should also just introduce myself quickly. I'm Dr. Pigeon, also known as Matthew, and I'm a community manager at Dungeon Slimes, which is just a little tabletop community that's means a lot to me because it's also quite diverse. So I really wanted to talk a lot about how communities can be both focused on their topics as well as inclusive at the same time. You don't just have to be LGBTQ plus community, but you can also just be pretty much any community because there's always going to be queer folk around. So I think the first question I'd love to start off with is, what does pride mean to you? Because I feel like this is such a good question for people in their mod teams to go along and ask themselves as well. It really does help you decide what you want to do within your community and Pride Month, how to go about that, because you can understand personally and intrinsically what it means. So let's go with SirHadoken first, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's all right. So for me, it's synonymous with unity. It's like a binding force that brings people together on the basis of accepting and being proud of and embracing who they are as individuals with no boundaries or restraints. Especially on a community standpoint, it's really difficult for someone to feel like they are welcomed in that space if they don't know that they can fully be themselves in that space. You know, sexuality and gender identity are such a huge integral part of everyone's identities. It's really difficult to present yourself and repress that part of it. And so I feel like having a safe space available, and making sure that there's that inclusivity there where it's like, hey, you can be yourself, you can be whoever you are. And we can assure you that we'll offer the protection for you to not get attacked for it or anything. I think it's super important for people to be able to know that that unity is there, because I don't necessarily feel like the unity is that it is fractional in a sense if people can't feel like they can be their full selves and express themselves how they were born, who they were born to be, and who they were born to love. If they can't feel that and be supported for it.
I love that response. I think that's really great. It brings me on to another question that I'd love to know from you, Hado. When have you felt pride? Because I feel like that ties in so quickly. And it would just be really interesting to feel like, how is that within your community, or is that also elsewhere that you've also felt it? And do you feel that you can bring it more to your community? So yeah, when have you felt pride?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess starting with our community in GDC, which is abbreviation for the server I mentioned earlier, that's actually kind of a funny place to start because it's the first place that I actually publicly came out. I had always internalized this idea that I was gonna like come out and people would be like, "Yep, cool," and then move on. Because in a perfect ideal world, it would be so normalized that, you know, perhaps it would be normal to just say that and people be like, yeah, okay, and then move on with their lives. But that isn't really the world that we live in. We live in a world where people have to stare down the barrel of adversity in order to be able to embrace who they are if they don't fit, you know, heteronormativity. When I opened up about it for the first time, there was overwhelming support for it. People were so genuinely embracing, and it felt like I was seeing a side of humanity that I had never seen before, but I don't think it was that. I think it was more that I was seeing the beauty of humanity for the first time under the pretense that they were seeing me for who I fully was, and to know that they were accepting me for who I fully was and not just, you know, the filtered like persona that I had meticulously carefully crafted for them to make sure that I was presentable and whatnot. When I first felt pride in the sense of being proud of myself as a gay man, it was when I realized that people were so embracing of that. I wanted to reciprocate that and be embracing of them, because if you are giving and getting in that relationship with your community, then everyone's going to come out for the better of it. And so I guess in terms of my real life, when I felt pride is when I attended I attended a rally for transgender rights on my university. I live in the sort of hyper conservative state of Indiana, so we had this conundrum where one of our alumni had actually gone into government and had signed a bill that would prevent all transgender students in the state from being able to participate in the sports of their gender identity, and it would force them to participate in sports based on their sex assigned at birth instead. And so we rallied with that, and we got together on one of the yards on the university, and a bunch of students shared their experiences. And even though I'm not transgender myself, I felt pride in that moment because we were a unit. We were unified, and we were fighting for the same thing. And we got really loud. We made a lot of noise. It was really fun, but it was a special moment for me to be connected with other people on that basis.
That's fantastic. Oh, this is such a validating stage as well because it's everything you're saying there is just so relatable. It's just so beautiful to hear. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's really amazing. Next up, we'll go for Citri. And what does pride mean to you, if that's all right?
Yeah. So, to be perfectly candid with you guys, I grew up with a pretty conservative, not a direct family, but external family, like lots of aunts and uncles that were very conservative. It wasn't really a safe space for me. And so, pride means to me that creating visibility around the concept of being proud of who you are and what you feel is not only heartening for people who are out, but people who are not out. Coming out, at least in my mind, should never be something that you have to do, but you should still feel safety in spaces, even if you're not ready to, reckon with that knowledge or like be public about who you are. You should feel safe in spaces, even if you are not out publicly, because I wasn't out for many, many years. To me, that's what pride means, is that I can still be proud of a part of me, even if it's still private.
It's actually quite, yeah, heartfelt of a response there. There's always a lot of people coming from a background where it's not tolerated, it's not acceptable to be yourself, and that's just sad because, yeah, it's so much hate. Hopefully, we'll be able to influence people on making more positive communities because there should be places that people can go and homes that people can experience, if online or if in person, you know?
Absolutely. Even if you don't feel safe in other spaces, like celebrating pride in community spaces lets those people still feel safe there. Even if you're not out, celebrating pride in healthy community spaces can help fill that hole or bridge that gap for those people that maybe aren't getting it in their daily lives or aren't getting it in other community spaces. So I think it's really important to celebrate, to create that place where, maybe there's something missing elsewhere.
Do you think it's also part of like normalizing it as well, or do you
I
feel like,
do.
yeah?
Deeply. I think creating like spaces to celebrate pride in healthy communities tells people who may be receiving a different narrative that, hey, this is what a healthy, happy like relationship with yourself and your identity can look like. Sometimes people just need to be able to see that in comfortable spaces. And so whenever people celebrate pride in communities, it's even bigger than you realize for people who are coming from different backgrounds. It's even, I would say, like it's impactful for everybody, but having that moment to say, this is what it looks like for people to be healthy, happy, and open is so, so important. It teaches them that that light does exist and your community can be that place where, maybe somebody can be more open than they can be anywhere else.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. So, Helperino, if you'd like to tell us what pride means to you.
Happily, and thank you, both Emily and Hado, for sharing those beautifully articulated sentiments. I really relate to what Emily shared about growing up in a place where you didn't feel necessarily the most safe, and that pride is sort of meant attaining that level of safety. It's been really really incredible. If I had to put it in as quick of a sentence as I could for what it's meant to me personally, I remember there being all these things that I was freaking out about and stressed out about all the time. And I was so constantly worried about how others were perceiving me, how to manage the persona, how to make sure that I was safe. And since coming out, it's almost like I can't even remember what that was like anymore. It's just not there anymore because I don't have to think about those things. I can just let myself just live in the world and actually relate to people and actually be a part of things and part of communities. And it's really special to me. When I think about pride in communities, I mean, I think the most powerful thing a community can do. I saw one question that I think is coming from an honest place about like, do we think every community should have to do a Pride Month? And the answer is, why not? Why are you so scared? No, I'm kidding. Uh, but what I really mean is, I want every community to be able to tell people, come as you are, and be built so that people can come as they are. That's what I think pride really, really means.
Yeah, you said that you feel like it also feels really special as well. Would you like to just expand on that and define how that special feeling can feel.
Oh
If
yeah. I mean, gosh, there's so many things, right? Let me tell you a story about something that happened yesterday. So I just moved out of an apartment, and the whole time I was there, I had a little pride flag on my door. When I was moving, it was pretty ratty, so I took it down and I threw it out. I got a little note that I read yesterday from a neighbor who was like, "Hey, I saw that your pride flag got taken down, and I wanted to make sure that you could still have one." And this guy just gave me two pride flags, just put them in a little envelope and attached them to my door. And he said, "I want to make sure that you can still have this." And that's something that you don't find in a lot of places. That level of community, that relating. And it's not like it came down for any sort of tragic reason. I literally just was moving. But that was a gift that that guy didn't have to do.
Wow, that's so amazing on your neighbor to just do that. That's really beautiful because it shows this sense of people looking out for each other and just wanting to have you back, even though they're like a neighbor. That's just amazing. So, Alexis, would you be able to tell me what does pride mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so similar to Citri's in that at its core, there's a level of being visible. Being visible is intrinsically linked to representation. And I think we all have a firm grasp of how necessary and beneficial representation across any board is. And whether that's being visible, like out in your community, going out to a pride event, adding that one more person there, or even just if that's not safe for you, being able to go behind a closed door, whether it be your bathroom, your bedroom, be visible to yourself, show up for yourself, and see yourself in the mirror and that you are part of this representation, whether you're out or not. But even to the person who gets to go to Pride and be out and contribute to that visibility and that representation, that is one more person there for a person who may not be in a safe place to contend with that, but they see you, and seeing you is the most important thing.
You are part of this representation, whether you are out or not. That is such a powerful phrase. That really is. Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really brilliant quote. Might steal that from you.
All the permission granted. TM, trademark.
Thanks. So, Ashley, would you like to tell us what does pride mean to you?
Pride means quite a few things to me. Firstly, to me, pride feels like a celebration of how diverse and inclusive the LGBTQ plus community is. It commemorates years of struggle by countless people to get where we are, but also reminds us how much further we still need to go. For me, in particular, pride means living a life that's authentic and true to who I am inside without shame. I grew up with a parent, one of them particularly, who very heavily, growing up expressed how non accepting they were of anything queer related, or that's trans or gay or lesbian or bisexual, whatever they, it made it very difficult growing up knowing who I was and not being able to, and with fear of coming out because of fear of backlash. But then got to a point where I needed to live my life as me and be true to myself. And so for me, pride is very much about living life, like I said, being your authentic and true self and being true to who you are on the inside and not feeling any shame about it whatsoever and being brave and knowing that you have this massive, strong community that has always got your back.
So, Ashley, you run Trans Community Center, an LGBTQ plus community. So, how do you feel when you celebrate Pride? Does it change? Does it alter it at all because of
Um,
you're doing it
for
all
us,
year round?
for us, obviously we are an LGBTQ plus community, but we specifically focus on the trans community. So that's all demographics, those that are questioning their gender identity, or those that are gender non-conforming, or those that are non-binary. So during Pride Month, at the start of it, we do like to focus and think about, for us particularly, how Pride started, how back then, how the gay rights movement started as well, with Stonewall and that sort of thing, because of the role that trans women of colour had in that movement. So we do like to think about that and focus on that more. And we do, during Pride Month, we do focus more, to be fair, on, especially over the past few years, more on the trans community within the LGBTQ plus community, because especially over recent years, the backpedaling we're seeing of rights and freedoms of specifically trans youth. So we try to show our support as much as we can, especially for trans youth, since it's very hard for them right now. Very, very, very hard. So we try to do our best.
Yeah, I recently got to witness you take part in a Stonewall history event.
Yeah.
What kind of strategies do you think would be great for communities to implement, such as maybe a history event, or how do you think they should keep in mind when creating a pride event for their community?
If it's going to be something that's going to be based on, let's use Stonewall as an example, since that's an event that we've done and we've done it in the past as well. It's very important to get your facts right, do your research into what your event is about. Make sure that if you are doing something like a stage event, that you have guest speakers that are from various backgrounds. So you get different point of views, you get different information, different interactions with your guests and your speakers. But also try and make the event as inclusive as you can. Make it appeal to the majority of your audience. It is very hard sometimes, I think, to do an event and try and cater to the masses, because unfortunately you do always leave some people out, which is unfortunate. But I would say try not to be disheartened by that and still try and cater to as many people as you can. But take your time planning the events, get some input from your community as well, and see where the interest lies. Basically give people what it is they're craving, what they want, what they feel they need.
I actually wrote a little bit about this when preparing for this event, and I put how it should be informative, celebratory, and impactful. And that feels like that is in line with some of the things that you were saying there to really try and cater it for your community. So if it's okay to move on, I'd love to ask SirHadoken. Hado, you recently did an event for your community. How did you feel that went? Because you did mention there was a lot of people responding, at least to me. I don't know if you mentioned on the stage, but would you like to discuss about it now?
Yeah, sure, I can. This actually is kind of a good follow-up to what Ashley just mentioned, because a lot of those steps were steps that we actually took. The real event is actually, it's not happening until tomorrow, but we sort of preemptively sent out like a little, not necessarily a survey, but we just kind of allowed people to assign themselves pride roles that would give them a little like badge of the pride flag that they wanted to represent in chat. And we realized there's so many people here who come from and are a part of this community that there's more that we could be doing to make sure that their voice is heard, because there isn't really a platform dedicated to that in our community yet. I asked around and I was like, would you be interested in doing a Q&A session with a panel of us? And we started a little thread that was like a heart-to-heart thread where people could like answer some icebreaker questions about like, how did you figure out that you were part of this other community? How did you, what were some of the experiences that you faced and some of the struggles that you faced socially, societally, internally out of that? Who helped you find who do you like look up at? Our intention with that was to get people to, upon answering those questions, see that other people who were responding to those questions may have been responding in similar ways to them, so that way they could find other people who, shared some of their experiences, were like-minded, and hopefully they could become friends with those people as they had conversations in that, so that way they found like of friends and a support group that they could continue talking with online to a closer extent than what we can provide on a public server. Hopefully that helps them be more embracing of who they are, if that's something that we can offer them. And that went relatively well, but people are still talking in that thread today, and it's been open for about like a week and a half to 2 weeks now, which is fantastic. And I love seeing it. I love reading through all the responses. They're such amazing people. But that was also sort of part of our plan. What didn't reveal at that moment in time was that we were looking through that thread and reading some of the responses to sort of gauge who would, be a really educated and experienced LGBT community member to potentially invite to be a guest speaker on this Q&A panel that that we're going to do for all the people who are in the community. And since our target audience is more in like the 13 to 15, 16 range, the education system doesn't really, regardless of which country you're from, doesn't always do the greatest job of explaining and going into detail about LGBT identity yet. I wanted to offer some sort of resource for the people who don't really know a whole lot about it to be able to get firsthand answers from educated and experienced people in the LGBT community to sort of ask any of their questions and clarifications and whatnot. So that's the thing that we've been setting up now. We've been reaching out to those people who were really active in that thread to be panelists on that, so that way we could have bi representatives, gay representatives, pan representatives, omni representatives, ace representatives, gender fluid representatives, transgender representatives. We've built enough of a panel to be able to hold 2 sessions for it. I'm really excited to see how it goes. I don't have the results yet for it, unfortunately, but I'm super excited to see just the potential that it may have, sort of help people come together and understand more and have more awareness about LGBT identity and what it means to people and hopefully to society at large. Because I think it's so important to be able to know, first of all, people's firsthand experiences with it, but also to clear up any of the misunderstandings that may be preventing people from, allowing themselves to accept people how they are and accept themselves how they are.
Yeah, that's really informative as well because it's really resourceful. And I feel like that goes over quite a bit of how you can do an event and it be different to your community. And I'm starting to see a lot more communities try and be just resourceful to get a nice forum and piece together where you can have a lot of resources that tell you about Pride or about the history of Pride or about things that you can do or just even look at memes. Like, there's different parts that can really engage people differently, and it's really interesting to see. I know at least on my community that's the method that we went for because we really wanted to just see a bit more representation. It was just more of like, oh, this is where you can find some representation. That's always useful to have. I know Daft Punk really focused on some French house listening parties to celebrate Daft Punk and the French house roots in the gay clubs of Paris, and they really love to do that in their community on Discord. There are other communities as well that love to just see, even just as words, and the Bicyclists, which is a bi community, queer community, very open, lovely people. They asked their members and they created a word cloud where you could literally just see what Pride meant to them or what the community meant to them, and it was really beautiful because you could see massive word of like safety or some other words that just really hit home as to how impactful and important it is to them. Even just seeing the word family pop up made me feel quite nice. So yeah, it would be nice to hear what we've got from Alexis, if that's okay. I just want to jump over quickly because I know you've been doing quite a bit on the houseplants. Like, would you like to discuss the stuff that you did on houseplants?
Yeah, absolutely. So, with all of our celebrations and points of remembrance that we choose to engage in our community at the Houseplant server, the foundation of it is always education and how to then help those communities that we are celebrating or providing a platform for. And this year, developed by one of our moderators, Seafish, also known as Finn, they found a really wonderful organization called the Transgender Law Center, and that's what our fundraising is for this year. Last year we did Glisten, and I believe we raised $1,200, which is so amazing to get people to stop spending money on plants and divert some of those funds to help people in need. This year's fundraiser is for the Transgender Law Center, and we, of course, we provide the mission statement and what they're trying to accomplish, but my favorite thing about this is that even having chosen the Transgender Law Center as the entity that we want to support this year, I believe it spurs a larger conversation for those not just in the trans community, but specifically those outside of the trans community, and to ask themselves, why do we even need a transgender law center? To then put that nugget in their brain and to understand that these are not only necessities, but they're highly beneficial. But why does there need to be one to begin with? And it's just like Ashley was discussing about the huge amount of pushback and rollback on transgender youth, especially today. So that is one of our events, and we've hosted a couple of smaller events thus far during Pride. We did a small kickoff, just like a fun cocktail hour of like let's just be gay and hang out, but also anyone's welcome. But this is just a safe space for us to just be us, to see one another in that light. So those are just a couple of things we've been doing, and we are super close to our goal. Our initial goal was $750, and we were more than halfway to that goal on the very first day that we rolled out the fundraising for the Transgender Law Center. And so we bumped it up to 1,000, and those who have participated get all sorts of fun treats within the server. And so we've had to extend our goal to $1,000, and we're super close. We're just at, I believe, 890. I just checked right before I hopped on. Yeah, we're barely halfway through June, so that's what we've been up to at Houseplants.
Brilliant. I'd love to ask you more about the why in a bit, but first I want to just jump over to Citri because I'd love to ask you, Citri, what Pride celebrations do you enjoy to see on Discord, and how might those communities get to build towards those?
Yeah, I know this is not the most earth-shattering, but I do really love to see charity-based events. I love when the community can get together and support something, but I also really love to see volunteerism events, actually, because I know that not everybody has the ability to support something financially. Sometimes even coordinating your community to go do a volunteerism like project. I actually saw a community that I thought was really, really cool. They asked some of their members to be like, hey, if you're not able to spend like some time donating to charity, why don't you like find your local either university, LGBTQIA plus center, or even giving soup at homeless shelters where, you see lots of trans and genderqueer people who are, unfortunately houseless. Like finding a way to also coordinate service if you can't coordinate funds is a great way to activate your community. I know it takes them outside of your community itself, but people can also bond and find like different causes that they care about. People can also like find out that, hey, volunteerism is great for them. I also just like to see when, things outside of Pride are celebrated. I love to see when communities like pay special attention to visibility days. It's so, so important to highlight visibility to certain subsects of like our community that may experience even more difficulty than, some of our more privileged like subsects of the LGBTQIA plus community. So visibility days, visibility moments, like visibility activations are another like fantastic way to draw people's attention to issues. And just in general, if you're going to do like a fun event, if you're even going to do like a, hey, let's get like all these streamers together, make space for people who are part of marginalized communities to take part in those things. That's still a fantastic way to like instill your focus on pride in activations that aren't necessarily about pride. It's about giving those people a chance to shine, a platform to share their best work, what they care about, because even if it's not an event about their identity or sharing about their identity, you're giving them a chance to show up for themselves and show up for people like them.
Yeah, we want to make sure that Pride has a lasting impact. That was more my question than what you said, but you hinted at that, and I would love to ask if you're able to say how can we ensure that Pride has a lasting impact after Pride?
Yeah, I think Pride is a great moment to focus. Pride Month is a great moment to focus and bring direct visibility. Use it as a moment to connect with, especially as a community like leader, connect with your moderators, connect with your team, say like, hey guys, let's get together and like put together some guidelines on how we make sure that we're uplifting members of our community. It allows, while you have this moment of hyperfocus, like none of us are immune to a moment of hyperfocus, right? But use it to build out plans for the rest of the year. Say that you want to like reach out to, members to be part of an event talking about like golly, my brain is like trying to figure out a good example event, so I apologize, but like an event talking about, just because it's in front of me, like sticky notes, for example, like reach out to people who are part of your community that are from marginalized communities to talk about something other than their identity. Give them a place to platform and like find community, like come up with ways that you as a team can instill these patterns of behavior of, even if it's not Pride Month, how do we make sure that people have their moment to shine, to talk, to be visible? Use that moment of hyperfocus, that moment of clarity that you have as a team to plan the rest of your year, even if it is just like, hey, by the end of the year, I want to have like 3 separate events that are focused on these things. Or by the end of the year, I want to make sure that like, hey, we implement like a pronoun bot if you don't have one already. Like allows you to set goals for your community to create happier, more accessible space for people who are part of the queer community. I hope that's okay.
That was great, yeah. Because it's a bit of pacing yourself because you don't want to burn out by just suddenly trying to do everything in 1 month all at once, when really you can just work on a plan and slowly be able to implement features. And as long as you're actually seriously considering on adding things to the community that are going to make the community more inclusive, it's going to be beneficial for everyone, really, because you're going to get
Yeah.
more members wanting to speak up, you know?
Yeah, even if you can't like do, you're all people, you've all got things going on. Like if you can't spend like a dedicated amount of time to do as much as you want to, break it out. Say like, I don't have time to do this all during Pride Month. There's no reason that this event can't live outside of this month because Pride is all year.
Thank you for that. I think next we'll go to Helperino, and I'd love to ask you, Helperino, what do you think would be a good resource for informing communities about Pride when setting a Pride event, or even just informing your community team, because you might not have a very diverse team and they may be struggling to look around to find some resource that could help them guide them into something.
I love that. I'm happy to talk about it. So, my first piece of advice is that if you live in a place with an LGBTQ plus center, most cities in the United States have them. More of them should have them. Most universities also have them. Try to go volunteer there. Even if you're volunteering as an ally, you'll be welcome there, and you should give it a try. My recommendation for those is because if you go to those spaces, you will pick up more than enough stuff to share with other people just by osmosis. And that is probably one of the fastest ways to learn and then also internalize this sort of really important stuff. So if you want to just learn more, try putting yourself in those spaces. If that's not possible for you and you're looking for resources, there's tons of stuff online, and people will find the stuff that fits best for them and their learning styles. So really, I just have ideas for how to make sure that you're getting the good stuff. And here's my trick to getting the good stuff. The first thing is if anyone's passing themselves off as writing a history of LGBTQ rights, just do yourself a favor and Control F 1980. And if you do not see the words HIV/AIDS crisis, this is not a very good resource. I recommend not using that resource. That is such an important part of LGBTQ history across the planet, especially in the United States, but everywhere. And if you're not getting that part of the story, you're not going to be getting sort of like the authentic story of what pride means and why it matters so much, right? There's this really wild thing where we talk so much about LGBTQ plus kids, and that's very, very, very important. We don't necessarily talk as much about where our queer elders are, because many of them aren't around anymore. And that's a little bit dark, but what I'm trying to get at there is that you want resources, you want things that you are learning from to be as representative and as honest as possible. And that means looking both at the good and at the things that should never get to happen again. But ended on actual recommendations. The Lambda Literary Awards are really, really good. They give out little Lammies, which I think is a very cute award name, every single year. Particularly post 2017, you're going to get really interesting, really diverse, very cool books in basically every category, from nonfiction to fiction to children's books, just all sorts of good stuff. Would recommend those if you're like more of a book person.
Brilliant. Thank you for that help, Reno. Next up, I'd love to go to Alexis again and ask you about why you use your platform for houseplants, as it is quite an involved community, and you do, it's not even just Pride, you also go for all the major events to really raise awareness and raise visibility for Black History Month and Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month and Earth Day. So what makes you, Alexis, your community want to be this force for good?
That is such a great question. And it just gets me so excited, like in regard to community. But just to circle back to the theme of representation and that it is so incredibly important. And I find that the tone and vibe we have curated and fostered in the Houseplant server has made it a home for many. And we have such a diverse community. We have people from Australia, throughout North America, a few users in Africa, definitely throughout Europe. Hello, Germany hours. And speaking to that, we want to continue to represent all of those in our community since it is a place of home that they have contributed to. And we do that through these types of engagements. And we see such a positive response in regard to feeling included, but not just included, but also informed with what we take part in, and then highlighting those celebrations and days of remembrance. I thought it was so interesting that Citri brought up that this is a catalyst, not just the only time you should be celebrating these things. I am Black year round. I am gay year round. It is not just Black History Month for me. It is not just Pride Month for me. by bringing these things into the focus, I think it serves as a great launching pad to then kind of take stock of yourself, how you ally or represent these communities, and how you can continue doing that year round. But it really is about the fact that we are all here because we like green things and we like to punish ourselves by buying plants we can't really take care of. But there's such a larger sense of home that is there. And so celebrating everyone in our home is the most important thing to us.
That's brilliant. I love that you say that all year round because it's so true, and it's something that people do just get used to. They just get used to the idea of just ignoring things that are problems within societies and within communities, and by raising this awareness we can change things, and hopefully they don't become problems, at least within our communities, and that will maybe seep into society one day. That would be amazing. But anyway, I'd love to end this towards a position, a note which will help with change. You know, I really want to think, how do we get communities and people excited and involved with Pride? Like, this is more of an open question. If who would like to take this one as to how do we get communities partaking in Pride on Discord?
This is, this is kind of like a more grassroots thing, but even if it's not your community, if a community that you're part of is putting together a Pride event, take the time to join them if you can. Use your voice as like a community member and a leader to support other community leaders who are trying this out. It's hard. It's hard to be like a community leader trying something new, and you don't necessarily know like if this is going to work or if like something that is going to go well. And the best thing that you can do to ally and help them in even like a small way is just to show up for them and support them and be part of that event. Show them that even as a member of a community, that their participation or their event is meaningful to you, because that just tells people the only indicator of like how things are working is whether or not people participate and show up for it. So as a community leader, you can absolutely like start things. Like I would encourage you, like I think all of us here are passionate about like putting together events ourselves, but if you're part of a community and you notice another community leader is trying something out, show up for them, offer your support. Like if you have the time to do that, like uplift them and make them feel like they can do this, because that's a huge part of just making sure that they continue to make this effort.
You can speak to your community as well and say, hey, what would you love to do as a community for Pride Month? And if they say nothing, then you can just brush that aside and say, well, maybe we should probably try and do something, because obviously people aren't aware and it'll be a bit more informative. But at least when I asked my community to say, hey, what do you want to do for Pride Month? There were suggestions left, right, and center, because they were so excited to be able to be represented and have their voices heard. That gets brought up. If people know that their space is a positive and welcoming space, you're going to get people that want to speak out and bring these points across of what they want to do. And hopefully we can foster that healthy space together.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when it comes to hosting Pride events, I mean, if you're a community that is either new or unsure about hosting them, or you want to host your first one or get involved in Pride in some other way, I think it's really good to remember that having your community participate or community team participate in Pride events shows the rest of your community and new people to that community you're incredibly accepting. It shows acceptance as well. People are far more likely to engage in a community where they feel accepted than others where either they're not or they're unaware of how the community feels about Pride or the LGBTQ plus community. I believe that running Pride events or events like them, it just gives off more of an accepting feel to your community. It shows that you accept everyone and anyone for who they are.
I'm loving some of the comments as well in the chat. Shout out to Helperino saying, what if we're gayer? That's brilliant. I'm running out of time because I've noticed we've got like 2 minutes left. But there's one question I'd love to ask, which is, how do you deal with backlash on your server when hosting Pride-related events? I think
I
that's
was
a really
actually unmuted to address that, which Marcel is the owner of the server I'm a part of. And as you see in the reacts, like, yes, and however, for me, it goes beyond just banning if you have an issue with what we're doing, this isn't the community for you, because how dare you make anyone else feel uncomfortable in this safe space? So this space just isn't for you, and that's okay. You can go find another space. That's fine. There's a pot for every lid on Discord. And it really does speak to something, and that as community managers, I think some of our biggest goals are protecting our users. We always get comments from people who are like, oh, wow, we heard that there was like a troll line. I missed it. And we're like, yeah, because we are so speedy. We never want you to ever see that. We don't want you to see that. So, in a second of your brain, that you feel that this is an unsafe space. And so, it really is just about, there's people who are going to ask questions, have a really, fruitful and education based discourse. But if it goes beyond anything of that, of even to the point of being contrary, you can just go. And that's just my approach to modding.
It's brilliant, especially when creating a safer space, because it really just it means everything when you're able to, like, I could be getting actively raided and I hopefully have made it so that my community members don't notice and don't realize. When that happens, it brings such a nice smile to my face to go, yes, because they know that their space is still a safer space. They're still going to be comfortable. It takes a lot on mod teams, but it's something that's worthwhile because, makes us all feel comfortable. Is there any closing thoughts? Because
I have
Uh,
one thing.
yeah,
Matt.
go for it. Yeah.
So you've asked all of us questions, but you never answered your own first question. What does pride mean to you?
I didn't,
Yes.
did I?
Yes.
I thought about this a lot. For me personally, I think I kind of forced a little bit on Helperino as to my thoughts, because I fixated on the feeling special, because it really generally does feel, when I sense pride, I feel very freeing and very positive and just generally happy. I generally feel like there could be anything that someone could be saying to me or doing or whatever, and I'm just in that moment where I just think, yeah, well, I don't. This is great. Like, this is because it's so much of a build up of from feeling so anxious for such a long amount of time about predicting how other people are thinking about me, or predicting, like, am I going to be normal? And it's that realization of you don't want to become normal. You just are normal by embracing yourself and just thinking none of that matters, and you just get to feel the positive and the happiness in your life, and then anything could be happening around you and you'll just be sat there in this moment ugly. And that's what pride means to me. And it's seeing representation as well. That will get me crying really easy and really quickly, because it's just such a overwhelming amount of emotion from the seeing representation, because it's just something that I've wanted for so long. That's part of why I love to celebrate Pride. As a gay man myself, it's really important to be able to see all members of the LGBTQ plus community get represented, because it's so worth it, I think that wraps us up. Brilliant. Okay, well, anyway, I really enjoyed doing this event. Thank you everyone who turned up as for the Pride and Communities on Discord podcast on Community Architects. Thank you everyone for turning around, and thank you to the Community Architects team and the event mods and moderation team for being awesome and supporting me in planning and creating this event. And thank you all to the speakers for taking time to be here today. I'm really glad this went, and I think it went really well, and it was well worth it. Thank you all for being amazing. That was our Pride and Communities on Discord event. Okay, goodbye everyone.
Guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care. You're all valid. Happy Pride.